Thank you for joining us. I'm Bill Jasper with the New American Magazine, and we have an honored guest with us today, Ward Connerly. Ward Connerly is a businessman, an author, a political figure, and a former regent of the University of California. He is also the founder and chairman of the American Civil Rights Institute, a national nonprofit organization that works to end racial and gender preferences. He is most widely known as the leader of Proposition 209, the initiative in California that passed in 1996 with 54% of the vote to end so-called affirmative action, racial preferences in state hiring and in acceptance for university, colleges and university. In 1998, he led a similar effort that successfully passed I-200 in the state of Washington. That garnered 58% of the vote. And then in 2006, he led an effort that passed Prop 2 in Michigan to do away with preferential racial and sexual preferences under the guise of affirmative action. So it's an honor to have you with us today, Ward. It's a pleasure to have you here.
My pleasure, Bill.
Now, you're active currently in Washington State with an initiative. And this time you are opposing an initiative. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but it would undo Prop or I-200, which ended racial preferences here in the state of Washington, correct?
That is not quite correct. No fault of yours, but the initiative is I-1000, and it supposedly leaves I-200 intact, but it redefines the term affirmative action, and it redefines preferential treatment. And it essentially says that as long as you are trying to achieve diversity and you make race only one of many factors, then affirmative action and preferential treatment do not exist. They're simply matters of the mind, and you can proceed. There's a lot of evil embedded in that premise of theirs. Number one, they defined affirmative action as applying to everyone except white males. They don't just state it that way, but they say that it includes race, it includes sexual orientation, it includes age, it includes veterans, it includes those who are blind or deaf. And so they're trying to repeal it by rewriting it.
So they're redefining terms here, but they would, in fact, by this change, allow a commission, a state commission, to determine what diversity is and when it has been achieved.
That's right.
And they can apply, they can't just say, we're gonna hire you or place you in admission because you're black, but they can say, well, we're looking at a number of different parameters here, and so we can change the composition.
That's correct, although they still could do that on the basis of race, but race is only one of many factors. And when I was, as I say, serving my 12-year sentence as a regent of the University of California, I've learned that there's no such thing as race being one of many factors. If you use race, it is the factor. It might successfully comply with the Supreme Court's latest edict that diversity is a compelling national matter and that it's legitimate for government agencies to pursue it as long as race is not the sole factor. And they've created this not so artful dodge, in my opinion, to circumvent the '64 Civil Rights Act, which says that people will be treated equally, quote, without regard to race and those factors. And what we're witnessing here is an end run around the '64 Civil Rights Act. It is taking the consideration of diversity, which is nowhere to be found in the Constitution or any other of the founding documents, and made that supreme. And to my regret, the Supreme Court has gone along with that. For 3 decades, the court has looked the other way at policies that are frankly racist, and done nothing about it. And we keep hoping that the court will say the use of race violates the rights of individuals, but they haven't done that. And I'm still optimistic that as the court changes, the flavor of the court changes, they will come to their senses and do what the law commands.
Now, this is 2019. The I-200, which was passed in 1998, it's over 2 decades old. What's the record so far? What do the critics say?
Well, the record from my perspective is that it's been a very successful effort because it's consistent with what I think most Americans in this country want. And it was what the founders had intended when the Constitution was written. The opponents of I-200 argue that a race-blind set of policies discriminates. It has systemic discrimination, as they put it, because it leaves in place white privilege and white supremacy. And the heart of all of this is the disenchantment of a few, very small number of black contractors in the state of Washington who prior to I-200 were getting subcontracts from prime contractors, and they've lost that because as long as there's no longer any requirement to give 10% of your contract to a minority-owned firm, let's say, you won't do it. There's no requirement to do it. And I don't blame anybody who doesn't do it. If you don't need to
go on the basis of merit.
You go on the basis of merit. But these individuals are not getting the contracts anymore. And they happen to be individuals who've been close to the political establishment in this state in Washington. And so they're the ones who are pushing this initiative I-1000.
Now, I believe the current governor and past governors, Christine Gregoire, Barry Locke, others, Democrats, are supporting this, and many of the usual organizations that are pushing for these things. Who is trying to keep the I-200 in place and keep the preferential treatment out?
There is a group that we have been encouraging on who will be directly and adversely affected by I-1000, and they fall under the umbrella of Asians, people of Chinese descent, who have a strong academic culture, have benefited most by race-free policies. And if you take away the requirement that you not use race, it's going to come at their expense. And I have encouraged them to stop sitting on the sidelines and to stop casting your fortunes, in a way of speaking, with the people of color and look out for your own interests, which happens to coincide with individual opportunity. Then you should oppose efforts to repeal our initiatives in California and Washington State and Nebraska, and Arizona and Oklahoma, and they have agreed with me. This was tried before in California to repeal 209, and it was the political reality that Asians were opposing this that convinced the legislature in California to leave it alone. Because there are members of the Democrat Party who happen to be Asian, and they were going to be kicked out of office by those who happen to be Asian who did not go along with race preferences. It harms it.
And what has been the result in California? That's been in terms of hiring and advancement in the universities.
This issue has never been about hiring. It's about probably about contracting first and academic matters second. Race is always about black in our country, and increasing diversity is just a euphemistic way of saying we've got to get more blacks into the colleges, into the select colleges, and get more blacks with contracts. Rather than competing as a prime contract, there is a handful of contractors in California and Washington State and other places, I would argue, who believe that they will not get a contract under a race-free regime. They don't bid. And if you don't bid, you're not going to get the contract. So
they're just relying on quotas.
they're just relying on the quotas.
Now, the I-2000 initiative has qualified in
1,000.
Washington, or I-1000, right, has qualified in Washington State.
Yes.
But there is a move by the governor to transfer basically this activity to the state legislature, correct?
The legislature can take this up and act on it. There's nothing that legally obliges them not to. And the governor, who is running for president, wants this as an issue that he can play his identity politics with, get it on the ballot and have the legislature pass it, and then he has something he can run on. And frankly, I'm not so sure that it is in the best interest of those of us who oppose this for a different course of action to occur. I don't know how voters would come down on this initiative if it were on the ballot. It includes veterans. It includes those who are disabled by reason of sight and hearing. It includes on the basis of sexual orientation. It includes on the basis of age. So they've expanded affirmative action to include just about every demographic group except white male.
And all of that was strategically planned, of
That
course.
was
in order to-
strategic. You know, if you're a circulator of petitions and you approach Bev Hansen or Janice Camarena and ask, would you sign my petition? This is going to benefit veterans. Chances are they're going to sign the petition. Although that's a fraudulent way of doing it, because it's not going to benefit veterans. This is really designed to increase the number of black people in the contracting venue and to a lesser extent in employment and academic admissions.
Your stance on this, taking leadership on this, has put you at odds with many of the vocal black leadership that's out there.
Indeed it has.
And that will probably happen again if it hasn't already here.
And you know what? I couldn't care less.
Do you have any prognostication right now as to how this is going to play out in the next few months?
My guess is that the political establishment is going to prevail and that the legislature will take this up and make the changes that I-1000 is commanding. It is bad in so many ways. Number one, it's deceiving the people because they're being told that this will be on the ballot. The legislature takes it up this session and makes the changes that I-2000 wants. It won't go on the ballot. So you fraudulently, supporters of this, you fraudulently gotten people to sign it and to submit it to the legislature and never had any intention of taking it to the people for a vote. Although again I add, I'm not so sure that I want to insist that it go to the people because I don't know how this is going to boil out. But it's wrong there. It is wrong in terms of the policy itself. People who are, quote, a minority are not in the same category as veterans. Veterans have made a sacrifice in their lives, and it's okay to give them a preference. But that should not be part of some affirmative action program.
Right.
So including veterans, along with people who are disabled or blind or sexual orientation, it's wrong. It's deceitful, and that's exactly how they've been able to gather these signatures.
Well, it is. It's good that you're out there working on this because you've been at this for a long time. That was what 25 years ago when you launched
20 years ago
in California. Appreciate you staying in there for the long haul, and let's hope that we get this stopped here in Washington.
It's important that we get this right. Our country has been navigating the treacherous waters of race for a long time. And in the 1960s, led by the inspiring words of Dr. King and John F. Kennedy, the country made the conscious decision that race has no place in American life or law. And we decided on what is called a colorblind ethic. We have a law, the Civil Rights Act of '64, that says everyone will be treated equally, quote, without regard to race. I restate that, without regard to race. What I-1000 is proposing is that people be governed on the basis of race. That's what diversity is really all about. You're empowering the government to discriminate. It's just saying you have the right to use a person's identity if you think that's what identity is. You have a right to use their identity, and we won't call that discrimination. We won't call it preferential treatment. We're going to call it building diversity. And that's 180 degrees away from what I think most Americans want if they fully understand that's what diversity is all about.